Welcome, everybody. My name is Jared Lyons. I am the Temple Emanuel Men's Club president, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. A fantastic turnout. So give yourselves a round of applause, please. You'll notice a lot of handsome men wearing blue shirts joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, they're from the South Jersey Men's Club. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but there is one gentleman I'd like to call up real quick for a few words. You may not know this because we didn't have enough time to get the sign printed, but Temple Emanuel Men's Club member Brian Fromkin is sponsoring today's brunch. So put your hands together for Brian. He is a esteemed Men's Club member, very active at the synagogue. You'll learn more about what today's program benefits shortly, but it's ironic because Brian was actually a volunteer firefighter for many years, so he brings that background with him. And I will turn the microphone over to Brian, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, guys. So, as Jared introduced me, I'm Brian Fromkin. I was a volunteer firefighter in East Brunswick Township, Middlesex County, for many, many years. Right now, I currently work as a nurse practitioner at Virtua and at Cooper. When I think back, when I went to Israel when I was a little kid, I went the summer before my 13th birthday, right before my bar mitzvah. I was young, I don't remember that well about it, but I was in awe of the land, and it really connected to me to my roots in Judaism. My family is multiple generations at this temple. I think we go back at least 4 generations in this temple. It was with great honor that the men's club sponsored my daughter, Elena Fromkin, for the Gift of Israel, which will be, I'm not quite sure what year she'll be going, but as far as I know that the South Jersey Federation, and along with the Temple Men's Club, has matched a sponsorship on that, which I really appreciate that. Real quick, I'm just going to give a quick about the firefighter thing that we're celebrating today, the benefit. You know, when you say been there, done that, I've been there, done that. I was at 9/11. I've been on many forest fires in our township, and there's a prayer that comes along with being a firefighter. And I just pulled out a couple of lines from it, and this will be quick, so it'll be done. Because when I'm called to duty, God, wherever flames may rage, give me strength to save a life, whatever be its age. It's one line I pulled out from it. I want to fulfill my calling to give the best in me. And if according to your will, I must answer death's call, bless me with your protecting hand, my family, one and all. Okay? So, you know, the help that is needed for the firefighters, there's nothing like being inside a burning building or out in the middle of the forest and not knowing your backup is coming. Okay? And not knowing that there's another truck on its way, because it gets hot really quick. So, you know, support these guys, make sure that they can get out and answer the call. The life they save may be your own. Thanks.
Thank you so much for those meaningful words, Brian. All right, so as mentioned, we're joined today by at least 40 gentlemen from the South Jersey Men's Club. Their leader is with us today as well, a man I've known since 2017. He's truly one of a kind. He's passionate, he's enthusiastic. His fellow members look up to him to lead the way, especially on programs like this that are so important to our homeland. So I'd like to call up Ed Silver, president of the South Jersey Men's Club. He's going to say a few words about our joint initiative today, and a few words to his men's club as well. So Ed Silver, ladies and gentlemen.
And I have an announcement to make when I'm done, but this is a wonderful turnout. I'm so delighted that both men's clubs could be here today. Let me tell you how this got started. When we found out about the devastating fires in Israel, we decided to do a fundraising within our men's club, and we did, and it was very successful. And then we thought, let's do another fundraising, but make it an activity, not just opening a checkbook. But we're not affiliated with the synagogue, so we don't have a place to do anything that would contain food, and Jewish men, of course, have to have food. So I asked Dave Schwartz, our program director, and Dave, could you just stand up? Dave Schwartz did all the heavy lifting. I asked him to see if we can affiliate with another men's club and get into an activity. As a consequence, we met with Jared Lyons, Ken Roman, and your next president, Sam Dutkin. And their program is such that the best we can do in terms of a joint effort is this event today. One of the things I'm so impressed with is the three men that I just mentioned. They were so cordial and so willing to participate, even to the degree that the money that our men paid for the breakfast is donated to the same Jewish National Fund event. So I really want to thank the men's club and the three men, Jared and Rabbi, for their willingness to have this event. Is there a more opportune time for Jewish people to get together than now? When the universities are being bombarded with anti-Israel, divestment, anti-Semitic, our students can't even find comfort in their own universities. The internet is just bombarded with anti-Semitic jargon. Our synagogues and our Jewish community centers are being threatened. What a better time for us to get together as a unified group. So again, I want to thank you for having this event. And lastly, just for our men's club, you'll get an email of another program coming up, but it'll be before our next meeting. We're going to do the end of Passover Chumetz Hoedown. It'll be Tuesday, April 18th at 6:15. You'll get an email. Spouses are invited. Just want to let you know. And again, thank you to the Temple for having this event.
Very well said, Ed. Thank you so much. All right, fantastic program on tap today, but a few housekeeping notes for our men's club first. If you were listening closely, Ed alluded to this, so I'd like to call up Sam Dutkin, please.
A lot of comedians here.
Sam, all this is going to be yours one day. Somebody told me recently that when you're men's club president, it's like owning a boat. The happiest 2 days are when you get it and when you get rid of it. So we had a vote this past week at our board meeting, and it was overwhelming. It was unanimous. Your next men's club president is the man to my right, Mr. Sam Dutkin.
Thank you, Jared. I'm not going to say a lot of words here, but I really appreciate the support. A few years ago, I walked into this room. Certainly weren't as many people here, and really didn't know anybody. So a few years has changed my life tremendously, and have met so many great people. Some not so great, but mostly great. And I know a lot of people out there in the blue shirts from South Jersey Men's Club know my father, and I'm sorry for that. But no, really, thank you very much, and turn it back over to you. All right. One more thing. We do have gift cards available for purchase. You can see me at the end. Help support our Good Works funds here at the Temple to stores like Home Depot, Lowe's, and restaurants, anything like that. So if you're interested, find me, and we have them here. So that's it.
While we're on the subject of my term shortly ending, there is somebody else in attendance today that I did want to point out and thank her from the bottom of my heart for allowing me the opportunity to serve as your men's club president, which really means working very hard for 1 day a month. But my wife, Wendy, is in attendance. I don't know if she paid today, so please don't check the book. She paid. She paid to attend, so that's real dedication there. But Wendy has put up with me in a lot of different ways, not just for being men's club president, but I did want to point her out. Publicly finally tell you that I do love you, hon. All right, before we get to the featured speaker, who I think is still in the green room. No, he's joined us, that's great, okay. How many guys were at our Music Madness program earlier this month? All right, good, fantastic program. It's something we're gonna look at doing, different topics of course, but every year. Really great turnout at the Music Madness. We called it Schlepperdy. It was our take on Jeopardy. So that was a great program. We've got a few programs coming up I just want to point out. Next weekend, of course, is the Temple's Scholar in Residence program featuring Rabbi Samuel Joseph. It's a weekend-long listing of events, but on Sunday, March 26th at 9 a.m., we are partnering with the Sisterhood to sponsor Rabbi Samuel Joseph's lecture, Do Jews Believe in Monsters? Some Do. So hopefully you can join us for that program. Then, of course, shortly after that next weekend, April 7th is our annual retreat in Atlantic City. So there's a lot of excitement building about that. We've got, I think as of this morning, thank you to my wife for allowing me to go on that retreat. We've got about 16 guys signed up and a few more have expressed interest. So we're hoping to get that number up to 20. It's really the highlight of our year and a lot of fun, a lot of bonding, and so we hope...
It's the highlight of Wendy's year.
It's the highlight of Wendy's year as well, that's correct. Following the retreat weekend, we have, I missed it, I'm sorry, April 3rd is our Men's Club Seder. That is Monday night here in the social hall at 6 p.m. There is a registration link on the Temple website. It is free to members, $36 for non-members. So there's a flyer about that where the flyer table is in the rotunda. So we hope you can join us there. I've already seen a handful of confirmations come through. And then the final program for the year is May 7th. It's Digital Photography 101. So picture yourself being in here and all that good stuff. It's going, and we'll see what develops. That's very well done.
Take a shot. Come on out.
Thank you. All right, so Sunday, June 4th is Temple Emanuel Men's Club Day at Citizens Bank Park. I mentioned before they don't know that yet, but we do have about 27 guys, family members that will be attending that game. It's a 1:30 game against the San Francisco Giants. We are waiting to see how many more people we have before we purchase the group tickets. So if you're interested, there is a sign-up sheet by the check-in table. Like I said, there's 27 people thus far. And pretty shortly, we'll communicate some information regarding the price of the tickets and some more events regarding that. Let's see, a couple more things I don't want to forget. Gordon Bacher, one of our Men's Club members for many, many years, is part of the Heroes to Heroes Foundation. We sponsored a program they did last year. This year, they're doing an 18-hole benefit golf tournament at Ron Jaworski's Ramblewood Country Club. That's on May 21st. It's $155 per adult golfer. Heroes to Heroes Foundation serves all combat veterans regardless of conflict. So Gordon Bacher, his wife Betsy, they're very involved in that venture. So I have more information on that if anybody's interested. All right, Jim Nixon, can you raise your hand? Jim is responsible for reaching into your pockets to have you participate in our 50-50 raffle. Proceeds today will go directly towards the Jewish National Fund in their support of rebuilding and protecting our homeland.
So who needs 50-50? Just come and see me, put your hand up, I'll come to you. Anyone? All right.
And speaking of our homeland, a man who needs no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. If Rabbi David can please join me up here at the podium. This is a man who is Israel, who lives it every day, is passionate. He's our leader, and I want to turn the microphone over to him for speaking about being Jewish in a non-Jewish world.
So that's my topic? Actually, Mike Karloff said I should open with, in conclusion. Thank you, Mike. Actually, I know almost everyone in the room, and it's good to get men together on a Sunday morning. It's a great bonding experience. Welcome, Wendy, also. So I've been a rabbi for a good number of years. And over the years, you hear everything. So for example, I know this member was very excited after a sermon, and she came up and she said, "Rabbi, you were absolutely superfluous. That's a good SAT word. And this actually happened. Somebody came up and said, Rabbi, I want you to know each one of your sermons is better than the next one. Yeah, I had to think about that. So it's good being a rabbi. I wanted to share with you an early story, and you'll see why this really ties in with our topic very well. I was reminded of this because we just hired our new assistant rabbi, Gidon Isaacs, and he has right now, as every rabbinic student has, it's called a bi-weekly congregation, where you go to some part of the country where Jews live, but not in great number, part of our topic here. So you travel to very remote places around the country, and for that weekend, and every other weekend, you are their rabbi. And they regard you as their rabbi. And that can last a year, that can last 2 years. It's part of your training. That's how we learn how to be a rabbi with real live people. And so I was thinking back, some of you know this story, but most of you do not. My bi-weekly experience, right before coming here, as a very, very young rabbi. And actually, and I found out from Gidon that this still exists. There's a lottery, actually. All these congregations, there's a lottery, and you pick a number, and depending on the number, you get to choose whatever is on the list. You get like first choice, anything. Second choice, anything. Well, I'm not really good at lotteries. I think I was the second to the last to pick. That was my number. So I see what's left on the list, and people are telling, oh, you don't want to go there. Don't go there. They eat rabbis alive. You don't want to go to that one. So I didn't have much choice, so I went to a place called Williamson, West Virginia. Don't worry if you've never heard about it. But our seminary's in Cincinnati, so actually one could drive, and that's what I did. They said it's really only 300 miles, which seemed really good for the first 210, and then the last 90 are through Appalachia. It was my first visit before the High Holy Days, just to meet everyone. And driving through Appalachia, it's really beautiful country, but it's very winding roads. You start off like in one direction, and by the time you finish this curve, you're in the other direction, and then you're ready to do it again. So I was already curious because everyone else said, you know, the community they're going to, they're staying at a Holiday Inn, they're staying at something recognizable, I mean, like a chain. I had on like my hotel is the Mountaineer Hotel. I asked if there's anything like no, that's the only hotel. That's the hotel that they have. And I was a little nervous because I realized driving into Williamson, there was one road into Williamson. And the same road out. And I'm really very nervous. Maybe I should have picked that other remote congregation, but... So just so you know, and this really has to do with Jews in Williamson, West Virginia. Jews anywhere. Just so you know, 90% of all Jews in America live in and around 10 cities. And we'll talk about how we got here, how you got here, why you're in Philadelphia, South Jersey. But Jews went a lot of other places, but I didn't know anything about this community yet. So I check into the Mountaineer Hotel. It looked to me, do you remember the show The Addams Family? That's what it looks like. And I check in, and there's after waiting a long time at the reception desk, somebody does show up and checks me in. I didn't see anybody else checking in. I didn't see any activity. And I go to my room. And I thought this would be a lovely getaway, you know, every other weekend. In fact, I was starting to have my doubts. And anyway, I check in, and the phone rings. So this is before like cell phones. And I can't imagine who's calling me, you know. How do they know I'm here? I just arrived. And I pick up the phone, and the person says, Rabbi? And I'm thinking, who is that? Actually, it was the first time anyone called me Rabbi. Rabbi. Yeah, Rabbi. Yeah. I had to get used to a lot of those words. And then the person said, Rabbi, welcome to Williamson, but I have to tell you, my father just died. And I'm thinking, that's sad. And it's sad for me because what will that, you know, I'm just here for the first time. And so after I realized to try to be the rabbi I should be, I said, I will meet with you and we'll figure this out, and I can stay as long as whatever is necessary for the funeral and everything like that. I realized I had not had that course yet. I did not have my book. I didn't know what I was going to be doing. So I met with the family. I realized, by the way, breakfast the next morning was prepared by the same woman that checked me in. She was the same person who made up the rooms. It was one person serves all. And so I meet with the family, lovely family. The person who died was 92. I asked about the community. Yes, Williamson has 6,000 people in the town. There are presently 25 Jewish families. It goes back, really, turn of the century. Very proud of their synagogue. It has declined a lot. At their high point, the early 1900s, there were about 100 families. I was really wondering, how did these families get here? By the way, how could 100 Jewish families even, 6,000 people in the whole town? And actually, that whole area, this was the hub for the entire area. People, and therefore it had a drawing population of about 150,000. That all came to this town, and I noticed when coming down the street, the main street, the only street, I noticed names like Applebaum Furniture and Kaplan Appliance and lawyers and doctors who sounded very Jewish to me. I would meet all these people. Anyway, so my first funeral ever. There's one chapel. Platt does not have a franchise there. And they said, we'll remove the cross. You know, we can do Jewish funerals too. We have a star we put up. It's actually a Jewish star. And so I have to share with you this first funeral. So I had met with the family. I was ready. I was ready. And so place is all non-Jews. Because, I mean, mostly non-Jews. There were Jewish people too, but it was packed. And outside the door, and even a speaker, they came from everywhere for this funeral. And because that family had been there, this was the third generation, very respected, very involved. So I came out of the green room. And where did Jared still? Okay. I lost him. So I began by saying, okay, Chaim in Hebrew, Howard he was the backbone of this community. He was loved and respected. Everyone admired him. And then I noticed in the back, way back of this chapel, there's a man, can't help but notice him. As I'm speaking, he's going. And I've learned since then, never look at anybody when you're like, actually that's not true. I'll give you, those of you in theater, Purim Theater in Summerstock. I always, and you better get me back to this story because I know I'm gonna, I always find like a few people that I really do speak to. By speaking to them, I feel like I'm speaking to everyone, but I find I just monitor like how they're receiving things and if I'm on track or have to sort of like change it up a bit. It's a very dangerous thing to do because early on, my person on that side got up and went to the restroom. So that's really unnerving. But anyway, this man, so anyway, I thought, wait, I had this conversation. So, well, he's 90, I said he's 92 years old. I knew that. And he really carried out the Jewish ideal of tzedakah. Not only was he charitable, but also with his time, and he was an officer in the temple at one point. He did amazing things for the Jewish community and the general community, and I did look back at that, my friend. I'm thinking, okay, it's affecting me way too much. So I said, he was a wonderful grandfather. He was a wonderful father and a brother and a family man. He always, even though he had a successful business in Williamson, West Virginia, and by the way, everyone there used to fly, have even their own planes and fly to New York for shopping and stuff like that. But, you know, he really was a mensch. He was a mensch. I mean, who could say he was not a mensch? Not a mensch. Okay, so now this was the custom there, and in the South, you've seen it in movies, everyone files out, but the rabbi or the minister or the priest, they stand outside the chapel and they greet everyone as they come through. And I see this man approaching. I can hardly wait to hear what he has to say. And he like, I'll never forget it, he like grabbed both of my hands and he really held them tight and he said, "Rabbi." I knew that now. That was the best eulogy I've ever heard. So that's what he did. So I want to tell you something about humility. Actually, Williamson, West Virginia ended up being the best thing that ever happened in my, I mean, other than coming here. But it really taught me a lot. I learned a lot. And you learn a lot from everyone. You know, Pirkei Avot says, "Who is wise? One who learns from everyone." And they were telling me, I not only finished 1 year, I signed up for year 2 in Williamson, West Virginia, and they were telling me, "We're so glad you're here for our 2nd year because this is the year we're celebrating our 75th anniversary as a synagogue." I said, I'm so glad to be there. And they said, and we have a request. I mean, we like your sermons and everything, but we've had students almost the entire time, at least over the last 50 years. Some we liked, some we have, whatever. We like you, but we want to have the most famous student come here. Who would that be? Well, that is the newly elected president of now the URJ, Union for Reform Judaism. Rabbi Alexander Schindler. And he used to come here. Not only did he come here, he brought his father, who didn't speak much English. He would drive down with his father, and they'd spend the weekend here. His father's deceased, but I mean this, and I'm thinking again, Alex Schindler's going to come from New York with this new position over all Reform synagogues. He's going to travel like I do, like maybe he would fly to and then drive the rest of the way, because there's no way to get there without. That's never going to happen. But they said, we'd like you to make the call. So I introduced myself, and I said, everyone's asking me if you would be our guest for the weekend and be with us and renew those friendships. And he said, when is it? I'll be there. And it taught me a lot. And he did come down, and we spent the weekend at the, he stayed at the Mountaineer Hotel. So same person cooked us breakfast, but I was able to bond with him and meet an extraordinary person. But told me, like, never burn your bridges. I mean, always, he kept in touch with them, and they kept in touch with him. And, he had a waiting list so long to visit synagogues all around the country and around the world. And he's going to give up a weekend to be with 25 Jewish families in the middle of West Virginia. A footnote, by the way, I didn't mention that the cemetery, when I asked, where are we going, I didn't notice any cemeteries coming in. They said, well, that's actually in another community. That's Bluefield, West Virginia. I said, so where's Bluefield? Well, that's about 90 miles away. But anyway, first impressions, I thought I would hate it because I was told I would, and I ended up loving it. So about being Jewish in a non-Jewish world, that's not a new question. We've been Jewish in a non-Jewish world forever. And I thought I would give you just a little snapshot of 1,500 years in 3 minutes. So from the year 300, this is our history. It's a challenging history. By the way, and I tell my students this, confirmation kids, but they won't appreciate it as much as you will. They appreciate it, but not the way you do. This is incredible that we're alive and living now, and in this country and now. You may question that more recently, but it's true. Why am I saying that? Look at Jewish history, like I said, for the last 2,000 years. And you wouldn't want to live in any of those time periods. Yeah, maybe there was a little blip. There was the Silver Age of Poland. There was the Golden Age of Spain. But for most of that time, or all of that time, Jews were always second-class citizens. We lived in a country, but it was not really ours. In some of those experiences, we were actually in ghettos. In some of them, walled ghettos. And Jews knew their place. And there were certain occupations you could enter and not. And you couldn't be competition for others. Therefore, you couldn't sell, for example, in the Middle Ages, Jews couldn't sell anything that was new. So what do you do then? Well, you sell things that are not new and, reconstructed, and the whole idea of peddling and selling that way. And at certain points, Jews had to wear distinctive hats, and they were humiliating hats and armbands. Hitler got that from way before, when Jews had to wear armbands. And basically, the schools were separate, Jews were separate, language was separate. We lived in a place like Germany or or England or France or Belgium, and we were not part of that community. Once in a while, a Jew would get, special status, but that could often be a very slippery slope, and it could backfire. And the most respected Jews would sometimes be actually hung in public as a lesson. Court Jews, other Jews of privilege, and moneylenders, and all of that. So to live now, and doctors, there may be some physicians in the room, but a doctor couldn't practice, even in this country. And many hospitals would not permit Jewish doctors. That's why in Philadelphia we have Einstein Hospital, or Einstein Northern, because Lankenau was the German hospital and Jewish doctors couldn't be there. In Cincinnati, where I grew up, we had the Jewish hospital. That was misunderstood. People thought, Jews are so exclusive, they need their own hospital. No, that was the hospital for Jewish doctors to practice. So all of this goes on. And here we are. Our kids are getting into schools colleges and universities where there was a quota, and colleges that wouldn't even consider admitting many Jews, or not too many, are now offering a Jewish studies major and Yiddish courses and all those kinds of offerings. So really, there's nothing for your children, your grandchildren, there's nothing you can't do in this country. There's nothing you can't accomplish, but we have to be vigilant and make sure that continues. So just to give you like a little rundown, you may not be aware, because every country had to deal with their Jewish problem. It wasn't just Nazi Germany. And the way to deal with your Jewish problem, well, if you give enough freedom, then maybe they'll assimilate, acculturate, and become just part of the general community, but that didn't work so well. You could try to force convert them. You can make their lives difficult, like the Passover story. You can restrict their access. You can get rid of them. I mean just by expulsion, and maybe get rid of them. So just a rundown. I thought you might be very interested. The Jews were expelled from England in 1290. The Jews were expelled from France in 1306. And from Hungary in 1349, and Austria 1421, and Spain 1492, and Portugal 1497, and of course the pogroms. This is the beginning of a lot of your story. The pogroms in Russia, what's become Poland, and that's where your story picks up for many of you. Even if you're a Jew by choice, and we certainly admire you. And we have those in our congregation who are part of an interfaith marriage, many, but raising their children Jewishly. So it could be part of all of our stories, because it's not just the Jewish story. But so around 1881, Jews and other peoples were leaving their countries en masse, and 2 million Jews would come to this country, and some would go to then Palestine, the beginning of Aliyot to Palestine. And when they got here, when you got here, your family might have gone to one of these major population centers, like New York, Philadelphia, or maybe further west. But a lot of Jews, like those who went to Williamston, and maybe a few of you have that story, they decided it's too crowded there, there's not going to be enough opportunity, I'm going to actually get on a train, hop on a train, and see where it takes me. And they meant hop on a train. They didn't mean buying a ticket. And that's what happened to those Jews in West Virginia. They took the train that was heading down south, and they said, it's enough traveling, let's go here. And that could be your story. So The big change, and this really why be Jewish, or Jewish in a non-Jewish world, comes to a head with Napoleon and the French Revolution, and all of a sudden, after all those years, 1,500 years of being second-class citizens, we were given, actually we won the lottery. We were told you can finally be a citizen of the country in which you live, European country. And for the first time, we could be Jewish and German, we could be Jewish and French, we could be Jewish and English. But guess what? We were a little bit misguided, because Judaism, they meant Jewish religion. And Judaism is not only a religion. We're more than a religion. So it's impossible to say Jewish by religion only. So that was already going to be difficult. But the question was, with all this newfound freedom, it's the question we have today. With all of this freedom, all of this acceptance, why be Jewish? Why remain Jewish? I mean, I know you know the answer to that, or I think you do, but it was a question, and therefore, at that time, wholesale conversion out of Judaism into Christianity. We don't have to be a distinct community anymore. We can be like everyone else. We should be like everyone else. It's not. Besides, how will we ever keep up a traditional Jewish lifestyle with all the freedoms now offered? How do we keep kosher? How do we not work on Shabbat? How do we do any of this? There's only one model. It's a traditional model. There are two different worlds. We have to pick one world. And this is where Reform Judaism begins in the early 1800s. This is actually where the Hasidic movement begins, which is also a very reactionary kind of movement, by the way. We have a lot in common. You wouldn't believe it. Maybe next year I'll do a program with Mendy, Rabbi Mengel, here. There's a lot in common as far as why they started. We have conservative Judaism beginning in 1890. We have modern Orthodoxy. All of this is a response to how do we make it all work? I still want to be Jewish, but it can't be one model. There has to be other paths to God. So most of us can relate to that. I think the question about being Jewish, it's really hitting home. Because that may be in your background, but for our kids here in the school, they don't know from anti-Semitism. Probably not. They know, and we do draw from, by the way, it's not just Cherry Hill and Voorhees and Marlton, we do draw from about 9 or 10 different communities in South Jersey, but for most of our kids, we live in a cocoon. A lot of Jewish connections and non-Jewish connections, very secure, very safe, very positive. It's beautiful, and it should be. But now, all of a sudden, they hear things, they see about Mount Carmel Cemetery, we're talking, where your family is buried, right? They hear incidents of anti-Semitism and hate. It's way up in this country. It's way up around the world. We could talk about why now, what's triggering it, but it's no simple answer. But it's around us and it hits home. It really hits home. It's really scary when it's your JCC. We can even read about 20 other JCCs around the country. It's terrible. But when it's your JCC, where I send, my kids, they could be in there. They were in there. So it's very unsettling, but I think this Jewish hate bias it's always been there. It's just under the surface, and it's not just against Jews. It's against That's why we have to teach tolerance. It's for all people. It's for anyone. Difference, accepting differences. And I think one of the things we're doing, but it's not a new initiative, is building these bridges of understanding with our Christian neighbors, with our Muslim neighbors. They're good neighbors. And we stand together, we support one another. You may not be aware that the largest single gathering in Israel is from the official evangelical establishment. They come to Israel every Sukkot for the Feast of Tabernacles, as they call it, and there are 4,000 delegates every year. And they meet in Jerusalem, and they meet there to say, we stand by you. This is your home. And you've made it a home. You've allowed Christians and Muslims to be here. They get the message that Israel knows that it's the home to 3 great religions and maybe more. And it's a great message. We have to build on those relationships wherever our friends are. So, why be Jewish? And I'm going to wrap this up and maybe you have a couple questions. Why be Jewish? I think we are and have always been a kind of alarm clock to the world. That where there's any injustice, inequity, unfairness, we pick up on it. And it's not just about us and our people, it's about every people. And we can't stop doing that. It's why we're here. It's why we've survived. It's why we've survived. Not so many of us anymore. I know when I teach this health class about, in health at East, I don't know why it fits under health, but they have a survey of different religions. So they have many religious leaders come in. But when I ask a question, how many Jewish people do you think there are in America? It's always so interesting. 50 million, 60 million. It's about 13 million. What's that?
Not in America, it's like 5.5.
Oh, I'm sorry. In the world. I got ahead of myself. 5.5 million in America and 13.5 million in the world. In the world. Yeah, in the world. And there were 18 million Jews in the world in 1939. And now we're 39. We have never possibly recaptured those numbers, and it's not just numbers, it's lives lost. And therefore we welcome with open arms anyone who wants to join us and be part of the Jewish people. And anyone who says, I can't join you at this time, but I do want my kids to identify, and I will have a Jewish home. And these are all like the unsung heroes of the Jewish people. So we have to keep on being that alarm clock. And have more children. So maybe there's you want to make a comment or ask a question? Yeah, go ahead.
How's Reform Judaism doing in Israel right now?
Very well. On the one hand, very well. On the other hand, not so very. Meaning, Reform Judaism is growing by leaps and bounds as far as attracting Israelis, and it's the same kind of question that we face. The same thing I spoke about. Basically, Israelis see that there's one brand of Judaism, or they have been taught there's one brand of Judaism. It's traditional Judaism. So if you're not part of that, which only 20% are, basically you're non-religious. You're Jewish, you're Israeli, but you would say you're not religious. because they were seeking, and conservative movement there too, but reform is very strong there, with already about 20 reformed synagogues, and rabbis being ordained, Israelis being ordained as Israeli reform rabbis. But so people are saying, wait a minute, I can be religious, but it's a different approach. But the not so good is funding by the government and discrimination at the kotel, and horrible things are said from the ultra-Orthodox there to reform. I mean, it's not just, it's documented. It's, when I was in Jerusalem and you go to Meir Sharim, one of the Orthodox, you should see the posters that are up there. I mean, they assume most visitors don't read them or can't read them. Shocking. Shocking that one Jew could say that about another. Basically, that Reform Judaism is worse than ISIS. That Reform Jews are responsible for the Holocaust. Things like that. But reform itself is really flourishing. And people are really seeking that. And if you would see reform in Israel, you would say, this sounds, you go to a synagogue and the Hebrew's in Hebrew and the English is in Hebrew. You know what I mean? So it's like almost all Hebrew, but the sermon's in English, but so it tends to be more traditional as well. But it's reform as far as getting its mandate from the prophets. Other questions? Yeah, Barney.
Yes, going back to the beginning of your talk, West Virginia, I was wondering if you kept up with that community.
Oh, I am so glad you asked that.
Because we know these small communities have struggled in the last couple of generations.
I am so glad you asked that question, because I think I need to bring this full circle with that question. So it's giving me the chills actually thinking about this. But so I'm here, and years go by, and I became the senior rabbi here, and I get a call from Bob Applebaum. He said, I don't know if you'll, I won't use his accent. He said, I don't know if you'll remember me, I'm Bob Applebaum. I said, Bob, of course not only do I remember you, but he used to sing Kol Nidre. Not so well, but he sang Kol Nidre. He was the only one who could do it. And it was Applebaum's furniture store, big furniture store. Basically, there was only one, so that's why the Jews did very well. I mean, you want to buy furniture? Bob's Furniture. It has nothing to do with Bob's, by the way. So he called me and said, I want to, if it's okay, I'd like to be a guest for your high holy days. I want to bring my wife, and we have, actually my family, I have family in Philadelphia. And I said it would be our honor. He said, because I'm the only one left. It's just down to me. And, so can I be with you? And he was here. He came up after services, one of the Rosh Hashanah service, and he was one of the most wonderful things anyone's ever said to me. He said, I was sitting way in the back. I said, I wish I'd known. Maybe we could have, there's a lot of seating usually right up front. Nobody sits in the front. He said, I want to tell you, there are a lot of people, more than Williamson, a lot of people here, but it felt like Williamson. It was as warm and friendly and welcoming as Williamson. And I think I keep that, that's another thing, to try to keep it as if this is Williamson, West Virginia.
If you allow me to, as far as I'm very, very, just like hit the spot.
Yeah.
There's a story I have.
Why don't you talk in the mic?
Or
This is gonna be, you guys are gonna, okay. So I have a story about being Jewish in a non-Jewish world, okay? And you guys are gonna probably like be like a little taken back by this, okay? So when I was in college, I met a girl, okay? And we dated for about 4 years, and she was Japanese, right? And we were getting pretty serious. And I am a pretty family-based person, so I went back and I kind of insisted that she would meet her mother. I mean, talk to her mother again. She never talked to her mom. And she actually went over, pretty much I said, before our relationship goes any further into the next step, I want you to go back into Ohio and speak with her and make amends with her and so forth. So she went out to Ohio. It was August. And she said to me, I'm going to be staying out there about a year. And I was like, what? A year? That's a long time. Anyway, fast forward. High Holy Days, I give a call out there. And I said, listen, her mother's name was Mrs. Yamamoto. And I called her and I said, I'm looking forward to coming out and meeting you. And she told me, it's not done, you can't come yet. And I said, what's not done? So I told my parents there was something fishy going on. They put me on an airplane down there. When I got out there, I found out that her mother was involved in the, which I kind of knew beforehand also, the Unification Church, Reverend Sun Young Moon. And for the next 2.5 days, they tried to convert me. They pretty much said to me, they gave me the best sushi I've ever had in my life, gave me a book called The Divine Principle. They gave me all these things, and they literally sat down probably for a total of 12 to 18 hours of just like videos and like trying to watch me and stuff. So, and then my ex-girlfriend now had said to me, he said, would you be willing to undergo one of those mass marriages? As far as, and I said, she said, why do we have to do your stupid little Jewish marriage first? I said, okay. So other than like throwing her out of my car at the time, now, I said, you know what, I'm very interested in learning about religion. And she says, oh, good. So I said, my own, like Judaism, it says, and then we broke up and I went back. But the thing is that when I went back to my hometown of East Brunswick, I was young, I was 21 years old, I went to my rabbi. That was like after the time my parents would happen and my best friend, I went to my rabbi for guidance. So even though like I might not be like the most, I know how to read Hebrew, I know all those things. I know deep in my heart that I'm Jewish and I have the strength to live by that Judaism.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have a question or a comment they want to make? Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Your first.
Hi,
Mitch.
Yeah.
And Mitch is joining us for the first time.
Yeah, hi. Moving to the community.
Do you want to hear the mic?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, I'm Mitch. First time here. Great to be here. Your locks is pretty good. Want to share a story.
Sure.
So, my expertise is academic medical centers. And about 9-10 years ago, I get a call from a recruiter. They said, West Virginia University is looking for a CFO. West Virginia, where's that? Long story short, I wind up there. I'm in Morgantown, West Virginia. If you know anything about West Virginia, like the rabbi does, there's this bubble over Morgantown because it's a university and an academic medical center. So you have actually diversity. There's no diversity in the state other than socioeconomic. You have money or you don't. So in Morgantown, there was actually a handful of Jews because of the university. So I moved there, and I become very good friends with a colleague. And about a year in, he says, I told him I was buying something, and he says, did you Jew him down? And I didn't have the balls to say something to him. And he was like my best friend. And then about a year later, we talk about something else. He says, did you Jew him down? And again, I kind of felt a punch to the gut, didn't say anything. One day I'm in the luxury store of Morgantown, Target. And I'm standing there buying something for my daughter for her birthday, and I hear these two women talking about sushi and a sukkah. I'm like, oh my God. So I walk over, I said, excuse me, did you just say sukkah? And they look at me very skeptically like, who is this guy? And I said, don't worry, I'm part of the tribe.
MOT.
So long story short, they happen to be from the Chabad house, that's affiliated with the university. They become like friends of mine. My daughter, who's in high school, joins the Hillel at the university. And every Friday, I get a challah delivered to my office. And all my colleagues who didn't know who the hell I was, they start asking questions. Yeah, I'm Jewish, blah, 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 blah. My friend Bob, who asked me about Jewing down, just never heard that part. So now I'm here. I get recruited to Philly at Jefferson, and I meet this wonderful woman, and I tell my good friend Bob, I'm engaged, going to get married. Great. And I said, yeah, we'll have something at a synagogue, and then we'll have it at a hotel or something. Oh, you're marrying a Jew? I said, actually, I'm Jewish. Geez, I didn't know that. I said, yeah, I remember, because I know we're best of friends. We've been to football games, basketball games together. I've been at your house, you've been at my house. You know how many times you hurt me? What do you mean I hurt you? By saying you Jewed down. Because you don't know what that felt like. Why didn't you say anything? I didn't have the guts. And what I really realized was that internal pride that we have, when you're with others who are like us, if you will, it really is tremendous, and just spread that wealth and that thing that we all have. And now that I'm here in Philly, where there actually is a handful of Jews, it's actually nice to say you're a Jew and not have someone say Gesundheit like I did in Morgantown. So I just wanted to share the West Virginia ditty with you, since you happen to mention it.
That's great.
So thanks.
That's great. And Mitch, that's a good message for us too. We sometimes are reluctant, all of us, to say something when we are offended. And it's really to be offended too when somebody has another kind of ethnic joke. It's not just, it's to say, that offends me, that bothers me, I'm not interested in that kind of joke. Or to catch somebody with saying those slurs. And it's a little thing. It's maybe one person, but you know what? That's what we learn in Judaism. You can't do everything. Can you do one thing? Mark, did you want to say something?
I was just going to share a story.
Why don't you come up? I didn't recognize you after last week. You're still a king to me.
So one of the things you mentioned was that our kids, in a sense, don't get exposed to anti-Semitism, and sort of we hope that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's the case.
Okay.
Maybe at some age, maybe our little ones, perhaps not. But I definitely felt exposed to it, at least by teenage years. And I, as you were speaking, I had kind of a flurry of anecdotes that were kind of coming back to me in that. I remember probably the first time was I was in New York. I used to do a number of kind of, nerdy academic type summer programs and things like that. And I was at NYU, and there were kids from really around the country. And a young girl, we were on a bus going, I can't remember what this specific field trip was, but she very, very genuinely and inquisitively asked to see my horns. Mm-hmm. And she was not criticizing, and this was a very academic young lady from, I think she was from Nebraska, if I remember. But she had never met a Jew, and there were a number of other Jewish kids that were on this particular trip in New York, and somehow we must have acknowledged it among us, and she had never seen a Jew before, and she was really, really curious. So that was my first. Again, for her, that wasn't anti-Semitic, even though we understand it as such. But the other story I'll share with you was in college. It was a little bit of a humorous one. I went to school in Georgia, and I went in Atlanta, which, like Morgantown is quite diverse. I went to Emory, which was probably half Jewish, although Emory only disclosed publicly that it was like 32% Jewish, because I think they were afraid it was going to become all Jewish. But in any case, I had a roommate that grew up in a small town, maybe 150 miles or so south of Atlanta, in a town called Tifton. And as you can imagine, when you get outside of Atlanta, it gets pretty rural pretty fast. So in any case, I had met some of his friends that had come up periodically to Atlanta, and as it happened, I got invited to a party in Tifton, and he wasn't able to make it, but I decided I was going to this party. And I involved even driving on dirt roads to get to the home where the party was. I knew a couple of young ladies that had invited me, and so in any case, I was there for the weekend, and so everybody partied pretty hard Saturday night, but they were all going to get up bright and early Sunday morning and go to church, and they had invited me to go with them, and I had politely declined, and I guess one of the girls that had invited me down knew that I was Jewish, and she volunteered the information that, I think they had asked me why I wasn't going to church, and I said, well, actually, I'm Jewish, and the kids there really were not quite sure what this was, and the girl that had invited me had said, well, Jews don't believe that Jesus was the Savior, they believe he was a prophet. And I will tell you two things. One, the kid that had asked the question had a look on his face of just utter shock and disbelief. Jesus not the Savior. I mean, you might as well have said to this young man, I want you to brace yourself, Elvis is in the next room. Like, that was the reaction that I got. And I don't know that I would have described, Jewish belief as succinctly perhaps as she did, but under the circumstances in this environment, I thought that this was reasonable enough for me, and I kind of let it go at that. I will say at this same event, just to illustrate kind of the nature of the crowd that was there, they also were very intrigued that I was from the big city of Atlanta. And one of these young kids had said, I know somebody from Atlanta. I know this guy. And I said, he's my roommate. And again, they were floored as to this amazing coincidence that the one guy they knew in Atlanta lives with me. So anyway, there you go.
Has anyone else been asked about whether you have horns? Anybody have that? Do you know where that comes from? Statue of Moses. Because when Moses comes, this is the part of the Torah we're at, when Moses comes down off the mountain, it says in the Hebrew, and there were rays of light, like beaming from his head, and the same Karen, which is a ray of light, is the same word as a horn. So it got translated in some places like a horn. And that's the translation that was picked up with the famous sculpture of Moses. So there's a basis for that, that it's in the Bible, but it's a mistranslation. But there's so many translations of the Bible, you don't know which one. Rachel, did you want to say something? Did you want to?
It strikes me that a lot of the examples we've talked about, New York, West Virginia, California, but I think it, in at least in my experience, it's alive and well in Cherry Hill and the surrounding areas as well. I know growing up, I grew up in Vineland, New Jersey, so just an hour south of here. And, I first encountered anti-Semitism when I was 5 from my next door neighbor. And it's a very small Jewish community, small but strong. And now most likely more of a dying Jewish community at that. But, just recently my son came into interaction with his first bout of anti-Semitism. And he goes to, a middle school just in Cherry Hill. And I would have to say there's like an interaction going on between a little boy and this group of girls, and the little boy was picking on this other group of girls, and so David, my son is 12, stood up for them, stop picking on them, and you shouldn't say that. And this little boy said to him, "Sit down, you dirty Jew." And and so he came home and he told us this, and it's a horrible experience to come into encounter with that in general, but also young. even though he wasn't, as young. And I said, well, what did you do? And he said, he told the little boy that wasn't, that it's not okay to talk like that. And he reported him to to his counselors or to whomever, to his teacher. But what it struck me is, I was grateful for the education that he's received and the exposure that he's received, both here and at home, about whether it be about the Holocaust or intolerance or genocide, because he was prepared to deal with that. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't caught off track. I mean, maybe it's a sad statement, and maybe it's a kind of a, on the foreground of what's happening nationally. But he's heard about anti-Semitism before. We're from Holocaust survivors' family, so he kind of knows that. But he was quite aware, not only to stand up for other people, but how to stand up for himself. And so to me, it was a sad statement, but it also gave me a sense of pride that he knew how to react and that he could stand up for others. And I credit that to what's happened here at Temple and just in general. I mean, I think that it's a statement that we have to teach our children, that kind of Pastor Niemöller's, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. When they came for the communists, I didn't stand up because I wasn't a communist. When they came for the gypsies, I didn't stand up because I wasn't a gypsy. And it goes on, and it ends with, when they came for me, there was no one to stand up for me. And so, I think that kind of sentiment is really important to teach our kids today, because it's, it happens locally, it happens nationally, and it's difficult. But I think if we come together as a community to deal with it, there is strength in those numbers.
Absolutely.
So.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you. We're going to wind this up, but and we've time for one more. Anybody else have? Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you come up also, so we can all hear you? You're okay? Oh, okay. I don't know if I can. This is attached, so just speak loudly.
Nuclear weapons are made in the United States by the Department of Energy, not the Department of Defense. And they're tested outside of Las Vegas at the Nevada test site. In 1981, after the Nevada test site, tonight, it was going to be an unannounced explosion. I was at a small steakhouse controlled by the Department of Energy, and I was having dinner with some colleagues. And suddenly I hear Deutschland über alles being whistled. And I couldn't believe it, and I turn around and I see a bunch of engineers at a table whistling this thing. And I went up to them, I told them, please stop it. They asked why. I said, it's very offensive to me, I'm Jewish. They said, oh, but this is an old Lutheran hymn, because Deutschland comes from, that German national anthem comes from an old Lutheran hymn written by Haydn. I said, I don't care if it was written by Haydn. To me, it's a Nazi song. Right. Please stop that. Well, they refused. I punched out the guy. Because I couldn't sit down after announcing that I was Jewish and let them continue to insult me, my heritage. And the fact that we were at the Nevada test site, it was created by so many Jewish scientists. That was the worst experience I had, because we were in the hub, the center of national security, and people still were insensitive to what that song represented.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, Mike. In conclusion, Mike.
If you know someone who's Jewish but doesn't look it, and they look like the bottle of various juice, all blue-eyed hair, ask them what they hear from the about Jews and Israel. You'll be totally shocked. Totally shocked. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being with us this morning. We'll do this again.
All righty, so it's about that time now. Jim, if you could stand up again. Last chance for 50-50 raffle tickets. We're going to have Ed pick the winning 50-50 raffle ticket. Jim, tell us what the 50-50 raffle winner will be taking home today.
I don't know if I'm objecting.
$135.
I don't know if I'm objecting. I've got
All right, so the 50-50 winner is going to go home with $135, which means that we raised $135 for our charity today.
That's right. I hope it's my ticket. That goes slowly.
Okay. 033.
Yes!
226. It's wrong. 226. 226.
Maybe it's mine. Probably some Jill.
226.
We got a winner. All right, from the South Jersey Men's Club. Congratulations, Ed Gottlieb. That's the gentleman right there with Ernst & Young. All right, so that's a great dollar figure to raise, but the Men's Club has gone above and beyond, and we would like to present to Ed Silver to send into the Jewish National Fund on behalf of us a check for $300 towards the Jewish National Fund. And I know that Ed's got something he wants to say as well, so thank you again.
It's no accident that the winning ticket went to the South Jersey Men's Club. Again, it's so good to see Jewish people get together, especially in this difficult time. As a last gesture, one of our members who wishes to be anonymous is donating a very pretty, lovely menorah to the temple, so we hope you'll enjoy it. And we hope we can do something like this again sometime. Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody again for attending. This was a great program. Hope to see many of you at our next program Sunday, Scholar in Residence, right in the same room. Have a great day. And thank you, Rabbi David.